is the Rat Alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K, how can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
Oh, for 5 years. 1,000 gallons of gas, air filtration, water filtration.
Hey guys, Toolman Tim here. Well, welcome back to the workshop. As I record this, I'm actually sitting at Delinquent's Gully in the cabin, just getting ready to hit record, and we get some thunder and lightning and quite a bit of rain. So if you can hear some background noise, I apologize, but it's all in good fun. So I hope you enjoy what's coming up here. This episode is the recording of my presentation at Kentucky Sustainable Living, all about the poverty mindset. So with that, guys, let's jump right in. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
No problem.
So half of what Jason said was true. So I'll let you guys figure out which part was true. And no, I'm just...
Maybe a third.
That's very true. Yeah. So how is everybody? You guys still kind of, I'm not going to do the old are you still awake thing, but you kind of getting to the end of the show, kind of doldrums. Are we doing all right? Yeah, good.
Excited.
Well, great. I'm sorry, I'm going to let you down then. So, anybody heard me speak before?
Yep.
Okay. Well, then I apologize a second time because you're going to be disappointed twice.
Talking when you were on the YouTube.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. I thought you was going to say you just heard me talking out there, so that's all right. So Jason, like I said, he is a good friend of mine, and it was an honor to come out here and have a chance to speak. So, anyway, anybody ever heard of the concept, the poverty mindset, before? Anybody listen to John Willis by chance? Okay, good. All right. So there's a few of you. So we're going to get into it, but I'm going to start out with a story. Anybody like story time? Yeah. All right, cool. So I live in a small town. I already mentioned that. We live in a small town where things are, well, anyway, quiet. Let's put it that way. In every small town, you end up having a city you go to, right? We're going to go to the city. And it doesn't matter where it is, it's always the city. And what happens when you go to the city? You try not to tell anybody in your family, right? Because if they know, then they're like, can you go to Costco and pick me up some rice? Or my favorite one that happened a lot was, how about, I just saw something on Facebook Marketplace. Would you mind going out to some stranger's house and picking it up for me? Right? Yeah, it's true. So anyway, this was a relative of mine. I learned a while back, the easiest way to get out of that was to call their bluff. And you're like, all right, here's the deal. I'll pick it up, but you're coming with me. And almost always be like, nah, it's not that important. Don't worry about it. But this one time, and I won't tell you who the relative was, but they told me, yep, I'll come with you. I was like, oh, man. It's like when you give somebody the really, really high price on a job, and you're like, I don't want to get the job. And then yeah, I'll do it, right? So anyway, we go along, and we're driving, and we had a couple hours. We stopped at this lady's house to pick up the stuff. And I'm watching them talk. And, the lady I have with me is, late 60s, and she's chatting away with this lady. They look like they're having a really, really, really good conversation. Maybe 10 minutes or so. They get back in the car, and I said, oh, look like a nice lady. And my relative gets that kind of sour look on her face. And I'm like, well, that wasn't expected whatsoever. She goes, you know what? I was like, oh, here we go. All right. She's got her own excavating business. She said, actually, her and her husband built that from scratch. I was like, oh, well, that sounds like a pretty good thing. She goes, they bought condos in Calgary and Edmonton, which are the two big cities. They go up there and spend time all the time with their grandkids. She said, they also bought property in Florida. They spend time down there all the time. And when her husband passed away a few years ago, she was taken care of because they'd worked hard and they had a business. I thought, in my head, I'm thinking, well, that actually sounds pretty good. And this lady, she gets this old sour look on her face. And you know what she said to me? Must be nice. And I thought, oh, that is just one sour outlook to have on life. I never thought about it, But those three words right there, they sum up what the poverty mindset is. Must be nice. And you'll hear it all the time. One day, I was at another presentation giving this exact same one. And my wife's like, I want a Diet Coke. I'm like, that's fine. I'll pull up to the gas station, you go on in. She comes out 3 minutes later, she goes, you're never gonna believe it. She said, I just went in talking to this nice young lady. A guy pulled up in a BMW. She gets that snooty look on her face. She goes, must be nice. So on and on it goes. You're gonna recognize it everywhere. But here's the thing. That was me. That was my wife, Becky. And normally she's here, so I'll pick on her and I'll point at her and make her turn red. So you just have to pretend she's over there. And also, one thing she loves to let you know is that I'm not funny. So if you want to send emails to me and let her know that I'm not funny, that would be great because it makes her feel good as a person. So, all right, so the poverty mindset. One day, quite a while back, I was sitting in a hotel room. It was during the middle of the week, and we were there because we'd built the life we wanted to live. We became entrepreneurs. We were able to go through the whole COVID nonsense doing basically what we wanted to do. And if you guys know what went on in Canada, that's saying something. So I wake up about 6:30 and I get a message. We have a community in my group. We call them the workshop delinquents because we like to live outside the system. And a lady named Tori, she messages me. She goes, hey, I've heard about the poverty mindset, but I don't really get it. What is it? And I'm sitting there just thumbing away, giving myself carpal tunnel. I get these long messages and I realize, that's something that I was really passionate about that I never ever thought about before. It was something we lived through, but I never had a word to put on it. And from that time on, that became my passion. I wanted to share it. I tell everybody you should have an entrepreneurial venture. I do. But it all starts from kind of changing the mindset, the poverty mindset, and that's where it comes from. So let me give you a little bit of my background. You guys know where Canada is? Okay, I wasn't sure. You know, growing up, we got American TV, but I don't imagine you guys got Canadian TV, did you? No, that's fine. I won't hold it against you. So just think I'm up closer to Santa Claus than you guys. So my wife and I, we got married. We weren't too young, but we had 3 kids, and we were trying to survive on $1,100 a month. Our rent was $550. Our electricity bill at the time was almost $400. So figure that out. But it wasn't because we didn't, it was mostly self-inflicted. We chose to do what we did. We made a lot of choices. But we knew, we said we need to make life just a little bit better for our kids. So what do you do when you want to make life better? You look at people who are successful, you think, hey, they bought themselves a nice house, so maybe I'll buy a nice house. Real quick thing here, don't go buy yourself a house when you can't afford the down payment, you can't afford to do renovations, and the roof is falling in on you. So just saying. You guys remember that movie Money Pit with Tom Hanks? Yeah, well, anyway, they had to pay us a little bit for the rights to that story. It was that bad. So we figured out we were going to get ourselves into one of those situations. We're going to make it better for the kids, but all we did was make it worse. We were digging a bigger hole and digging a bigger hole. So I looked around and, you know, I was working, I was doing okay, and I thought, all right, where do we go from here? And I seen a guy, his name was Dean. I worked with him at the hardware store, and we were struggling real bad. I mean, we had no money. And I used to look my nose down at him because the dude, what would he do? He'd work all day as the assistant manager. Then he had the contract to clean that night. He would do the cleaning, but that wasn't it. Then he'd go home and run the convenience store with his wife. The dude worked his behind off 24/7. He was the absolute definition of the abundance mindset. And I would look down at him and think, that's stupid. Why is he wasting all his time? So anyway, eventually one day it started getting in my head. I'm like, I got to do something with this. So we said, all right, I know what we'll do. The fire hall is looking for somebody to do the cleaning. So we'll put in a bid. I'd never done a bid, never done a tender. Took me like a week. I was so proud of it. Sent it all in, and we got the job and made $1 million. Anybody believe me? No, okay, because we didn't. It ended up the fire hall's niece, the fire chief's niece got the contract. So I was starting to see that we were living in a poverty mindset, but we needed to make changes. And I grew up in a place that embraced the poverty mindset, I'm going to tell you. So eventually we got to the point where it was going to be bankruptcy, we were going to be homeless, and we always had a rule with me and my wife. The lights always stayed on, the kids always had toilet paper, and the kids always had full tummies. And we never broke that rule. But there were days where we came damn close. So you guys know where Maine is. That's where I kind of grew up, Nova Scotia, which is very close. And one day we realized we were so deep into it that we needed to make a change. My in-laws lived in Alberta, and that is oil country. And they said, hey, if you want to come out and sleep on they're like, we'll put you up. I didn't realize they had the world's tiniest mobile home. I knew they had a baby. I knew my mother-in-law was staying with them. So we had 4 adults and a newborn baby in a place that's supposed to sleep maybe 2 or 3. They bought a little cot, they put it up in their living room. I didn't even have the money for the plane ticket to fly out there. They lent me that. But we knew we had to make a change because we had kept digging and digging and digging. So I get out there and I end up getting myself a job. 2 jobs actually within 24 hours paying me $27 to $30 an hour in the oil patch. I was making money. 5 months later, and I still can't believe this didn't end in divorce, I'm gonna tell you. But I left my wife at home with 5 kids, 2 under 2 in diapers, in a 130-year-old house, trying to hold it all together while I went out to do something for us. 5 months later, she came out. She got a job. We're both making really, really, really good money. And we lived happily ever after. What are you laughing at? You don't believe me? This guy here doesn't believe me. Well, let me tell you. So, anyway, my wife had an awesome job working as a dispatcher in the oil patch. So again, we were still kind of holding on to that poverty mindset. We weren't saving money. We were doing really good, the most money we'd ever made in our life. So you know what we decided to do? Take a trip to Las Vegas, because that's what everybody does, right? So the day, she took a nice vacation. She had 1 extra day before we flew out. And her boss calls and says, hey, can you come in? She's like, sure, I'm a company player, I'll come in. The day before our vacation, they laid her off. Yep, within a year, well, that was the day that the worldwide price of oil dropped. This was 10 years ago, well, 9 years ago now. Within 6 months, I was laid off too, and we were in a worse situation than we started before. Because now we didn't own a home, we didn't have a metaphorical pot to piss in. I couldn't even afford to buy a pot if I wanted one. So we were in a rough shape for a little while. But you know what? I always say abject poverty is a great motivator, and I'd spent a lot of time doing everything myself because I couldn't afford to do it any other way. So I thought, you know, I know all this stuff. I'll hang a shingle, I'll be a handyman. I started a handyman business and I lived happily ever after. Why are you always laugh? Every time I say something, you laugh.
I've watched you on YouTube.
I know you do. So it did get a little better. But you know what? Within 6 to 8 months, things were still going down. I wasn't charging enough. I wasn't getting enough customers. I panicked. So I went back to knowing what I did and I got a job at a hardware store. And that was okay. I hated it. But the thing I did was I kept that business going. I realized that if I wanted to change something, it was going to be clearing snow. You guys know what snow is? All right, cool. Yeah, because we get that up there a lot. And I made a lot of money off snow. I called it white gold for a few years. So I would go and I would clear snow before work, on my coffee break, at lunchtime, on my afternoon coffee break, and after work. And I just kept pushing it and pushing it. And a year later, I walked away and did that business full time. So that was the real first step. We eventually turned that into, I don't want to gloss it over, but it's a long story, but during COVID, we decided the best idea was to open a daycare as well. And we did. We opened one, and now we have 3. So I've got a YouTube channel, the handyman business, I kind of sold some of that, and we've got 3 daycares now. And we're in the best shape we ever were, but I had to get on that plane and fly on out. So I want to tell you another little story. You guys good with stories? Keeping you up? All right. So little boy, he grew up in Mississippi, and this was in the 1940s. And he had nothing at all. His dad was a barber. Not that there's anything wrong with being a barber. I'm not against it or anything, but his dad was a barber and his mom was an assistant school teacher. His dad died really young. His mom had no money. They sent him along to live with his grandmother, who had even less money, but they figured grandma will take care of him. If there was ever a little boy that deserved to live in that poverty mindset, it was him. So we're going to set that little boy aside and we're going to come back to him in a few minutes because we need to talk about him just a little bit. All right, so how do we recognize the poverty mindset? Anybody want to guess? Because you can see it. He's smiling right here. Must be nice, absolutely. But it's way more how you hear it. And the thing is, you may not even realize that you're suffering from the poverty mindset. It's like the lion who's been in captivity his entire life. He doesn't know any better, right? He's grown up in a cage. He's always been in a cage. But the second you let him out and you let him play around in the wild for just a little while, and then you put him back in the cage, you want to see a dejected lion that day. He's done. Because he's now known a taste of the freedom. And I want to tell you, once you start realizing that maybe you're living in the poverty mindset, you're going to end up dejected until you do something about it. Simple as that. So the first one is, well, we're just going to do it this way. I can tell you what it looks like, but it's way better to tell you what it sounds like. And the first one is, the world is against me. You just don't understand. It's the way it is here. Folks say it all the time, right? I grew up in a small town in Nova Scotia. Nobody ever wanted to start a business. Nobody ever wanted to do great things. It's just the way it is here. Simple as that. How about the world's against me? A curse. So when I first met the love of my life, Becky, we got engaged, and she said a few days later, I got a story, I got a secret I need to tell you. I was like, that don't sound good. She goes, I got to make sure you're ready to marry me. I said, okay. She goes, I need to tell you about the Cooper curse. So her maiden name was Cooper. I'm like, where are we going with this? And she says to me, she goes, you need to understand that bad things happen to my family all the time. Because she grew up, and she'd be honest about it, she grew up in a very poor home. So she was used to bad things happening all the time. And I want to tell you, I married her, but when we moved to Alberta, and she got laid off on the first day of her vacation, I was starting to believe her just a little bit. So folks say all the time, the world is against me. Or how about, I just want what I'm entitled to. Entitlement, that's the big one today, right? Everybody thinks, I just want what I'm entitled to. I don't know why anyone thinks they're owed anything in the world. My dad worked with a guy, two brothers, Stanley and Harry. They were good people. Harry, they both come from a very, very poor family. Harry ended up going from bag boy at the grocery store to assistant manager to owner, who then built a bigger store. And then one day a grocery conglomerate came in and said, hey, we want to buy you out. No, sorry, they said, we are going to buy you out, give us a price. So he went home and he thought of the biggest price he could ever think of, and then he doubled it. And he took it in, and the next day they give him, 3 minutes later, they said, here's a check. He did well, he grew up. Now his brother Stanley, same thing. There's no reason they both couldn't have done something with their life. Stanley was always riding off his brother's coattails. He made tons of bad decisions, tried to open a convenience store one day, and he spent all his money smoking his profits away, scratching lottery tickets away, and every time he ran out of money, he would go to Harry and say, Harry, can I have some money? And eventually Harry cut him off, and he said, you're not getting any more. And one day they sat in the break room at work, and Harry and my dad was talking to Stanley, and he said, I don't understand. Harry has all kinds of money. I just want what I'm entitled to. How does somebody get that kind of mindset? I just want what somebody's else, right? Doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. How about, do you guys know anybody? Oh, I would have been a millionaire if. You know, I had this great idea for the clapper. You guys remember the clapper? Yeah. Back in 1987, I had an idea of turning on lights by clapping my hands. If I'd have just went and patented that idea, I'd be a millionaire today, right? Anybody know the people that live in high school, or they lived back in the day? I mean, when I was in high school, I had a great idea to open a self-storage place in my town. The dude who did it made a mint, but I don't sit around and say, I'd have been a millionaire if I'd have done that, right? So you just got to pay attention to it. And how about if I was born rich? You guys hear that one a lot? You know, if I was just born into a family. So here's what you got to know about the poverty mindset. It's not about getting rich. It's about improving your station in life. Everybody's born somewhere, and it's about doing something better. It's not about looking at somebody else and saying, must be nice, you know? I heard somebody say the other day, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are only rich because they started the business in the mid-90s when government was subsidizing internet. Well, you know what? There was 300 million people in North America at that time. How come they were the only two that got rich? Because they did what they needed to do. It's the must be nice. And you know what all of those do? They all give us permission to be lazy. They all give us permission to not change. Because what do they say? The only person that likes change is a dirty baby. Right? It's true. Nobody wants to change. Everybody wants to stay at home, watching the baseball game, eating Doritos. Not that there's anything wrong with baseball. I'm a Jays fan myself. But I'm just saying, nobody wants to take ownership for their life at this point. Everybody just says, I'm good with what I'm doing. And if it's not my fault, if I wasn't born rich, if I wasn't born in this town, if I had just invented that thing and patented it back in the day, then I'd be okay. But because I'm not, I don't have to do anything. That's the problem. How about this? I can't find time. I can't find the energy. I can't find the skills to do it. People love to say it, I just can't. Or I don't. How about I don't have the time, or I don't have the energy? Those are two of the big ones that folks use all the time. They're just excuses. So we got to flip them, right? How about we go to how can I, or how do I? I want to tell you, I don't think he's in here today, but I run into Chase Peoples. You know Chuck, the medical guy? His son right now drives truck all day. Then he goes home and he runs a mini excavator, a Bobcat, in the evening. He is in his mid-20s and he paid for that thing in cash. because he worked his butt off in the evenings. He didn't say, well, I can't because I have a newborn and I have a wife at home. And he wanted to build the life he wanted to live. So guess what he did? He asked himself, how can I, instead of, I can't. All right, so how do we flip the switch? Is there anybody in here keeping track of time? Because I will go way long if we are, I want to give you 45 minutes, but I don't want to, oh, you're, okay, we're good? Just kind of wave at me when we got maybe 10 minutes left, because I don't want to. Perfect. All right. So I should have set that up before we started. So, all right. One more story for you. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I better stop talking like a slow Canadian and start speeding it up like a Southerner, right? Sorry. All right. In my town, again, and of course we speak from experience, right? It's like a cliche. They're true because they've been repeated so many times. But the stories I know come from my hometown. I had a really good friend. He came from a family of 4, and he lived in one of those homes. You know those homes? Everybody has one in their town. Nobody wants to step foot in it. It's dirty, it's dingy. Probably the folks are pretty poor, and you just don't ever go there, right? Well, he had a brother and 2 sisters, so there's 2 boys, 2 girls. The 2 girls followed in their steps of their mother. They never left town. They've done exactly what their mother did, which was not a whole heck of a lot of anything, which is a shame. I'm not judging, I'm just saying. But the boys, the one, he met a girl, he moved out of town, he got a good job across the country. The other one got married, bought a house. I think he's an assistant manager at a grocery store right now. So tell me, you got a family like that was the absolute poorest family in my town. 2 people never even made excuses, they just didn't do it. And the other 2 didn't let excuses hold them back. What's the difference? How come some can and some can't? Because somebody flicked the switch. They decided it was time to not live in the poverty mindset. And folks will say, but you don't understand, you don't understand. No, you're right, I don't. I can only tell you what I've done in my life, and I can only tell you that it's okay to change wherever you happen to be right now. Simple as that. So how do we flick the switch? How do we start? Well, the first thing is to get excited for other folks. When Carrie, right there, told me earlier today all the great things that are happening in his life and the business that he has gone, and he wasn't working for the man before, but he's even less working for the man now. Get excited. And it's okay if you're not actually excited. Sometimes you got to fake it till you make it. Because
I'm excited. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. Come on, clap for, yeah, you don't have to clap, but I'm excited. That's right. But that's what it is. You get excited for other folks. A mark of a good well, sorry, let me back up. My mouth gets going and sometimes. Anyway, so if you want to know somebody who is in the poverty mindset, they're going to be like, must be nice. But if you want to know somebody who is embracing the abundance mindset, they're going to be say, good for you. 3 words, but they mean all the difference in the world. So start with getting excited for other people. And then you got to accept that it's all your fault. And I don't mean what's happened to you in this world is all your fault, because you can't control that. But what can we control? How we react to it. And the whole, and I don't want to go down that whole rabbit hole, but the world today, a whole lot of it is, it's not your fault, so don't bother. But it is. How you react to absolutely everything is your fault, because you have no choice. You have to react. So you get to choose, am I going to turn this into something great, or am I going to turn it into something bad? And then we need to know that bad stuff happens in this world, and it's going to happen. I had a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day in business one time that was enough to make me pull my non-existent hair out. But thank goodness I had a great have a great wife who has taken really good care of me. But bad stuff happens. Then we got to change who we surround ourselves with. So if you're hanging out with the barflies or doing, if exactly that. If we're hanging out, even at a gun, man, I love gun shops, but there are some negative gun shops. You can go in there and all they ever do is talk about how the world's going to end and how this government, that doesn't matter. Get yourself around people who build you up. You should never be the most successful person in your friendship group. You should be the least successful in trying to learn from everybody and crawl your way up. Simple as that. But change who you surround yourself with. Change where you spend your time. Again, when I talk about Chase, that's where it came from. That dude was, he had this time in the evening to build a business that he wanted to build. So he did it. Instead of going home, and I don't know if he watched TV, I'm going to make him sound really lazy, but instead of going home, putting his feet up, smoking a cigar and watching TV, he decided, I'm going to go out, I'm going to make enough money to build a business, and I'm going to make it so my family's set. Change where you spend your time. Simple as that. How about take risks? Sometimes I throw in an expletive in there, but we're not going to do that today. My wife's grandmother, God rest her soul, I never met her. Her name was Jean. And she was married for many, many years. And when she first got married, they were almost as broke as Becky and I were. And her husband, he wasn't very good with money, so she would save a bunch of money, and she had it put aside in a cookie jar. And it was awesome. That was their rainy day fund. That was their preps at the time. One day she came home, and that jar was empty. Yep, she was fit to kill. If you knew my wife's temper, apparently she's got twice as bad, and that's saying something. So she was sitting at the kitchen table when he came home, and she was ready to kill him. She figured he went to the horses or the strippers or something. She didn't know where he went. He came home and he was all excited, and he said, honey, we need to talk. He said, I bought a business. It was $500, is every penny they had in the world, and he went out and bought what was left of a drywall business. That was a risk. That was all they had. He probably should have asked for permission before he asked for forgiveness, but I'll forgive him for that. They ended up turning that business into a huge campground, into a bowling alley, into rental properties. And when he died early, Jean was taken care of for the rest of her life. I'm not telling you to go home and steal the $500 out of your wife's cookie jar, but I am telling you sometimes you got to take risks. Sometimes you got to burn the boat. Sometimes you got to haul the bridges down. And I never used to say that because I used to be the play it safe guy. But I'm telling you, there really needs to be no plan B when you're doing this kind of stuff. You got to figure it out, set a plan. You might change it as you go along, but there's no plan B. You got to do it 100%. Invest in yourself. That's the big one. Once you flip that switch and you're like, yeah, I'm excited for Carrie, I'm excited for Chase, I'm excited for Jason, then you start investing. You say, okay, well, how do I do this? How do I learn the skills? Watch YouTube videos, train, wash windows, whatever it is you need to do, but start investing in yourself. Invest your time because, again, where we spend our time shows what we value. I had an old pastor friend of mine many years ago. He always said, folks, always find the time for what's important to them. You can say something's important to you, but if you don't spend time on it, it's not real important, is it? How about invest your money? This is a tough one. And yeah, this is where Tim asked me to buy some kind of crypto or something. No, I'm just kidding. No, what it really comes down to is if you want something in your life, number one, you got to take risks. You got to take chances. And sometimes you got to put a little money where your mouth is. Not a lot. A lot of times you can just work and figure it out and make the money as you go along. But investing, what does that do? Investing implies a return down the road, right? And that's the cool thing. So, you start, how about time? When I first started my handyman business, I put 10 hours a week in, every week, 10 hours, nice and flat all along. I wasn't seeing an investment, but eventually that same 10 hours every single week started building a business like this. But it doesn't happen overnight. It takes months, years, you don't know. You're not sure. That's the hard part of doing this, is you don't really know how long it's going to take. You can do the right things to become successful, but you don't always know. Now, once you've kind of got yourself in the right headspace, I'm going to tell you something. It's still going to be a struggle. Life's always a struggle, whether you decide to change something or not. If you want to sit down and just go with the flow in the river, that might not seem hard at first, but it's sure going to seem hard when you go off the waterfall down to the rocks, right? Because you can sit there, if you want great things in life or you don't want great things in life, life's still going to be a struggle. That's the key. You got to look at it and say, okay, I'm going to change something. I'm going to work just a little bit harder. But here's the thing, those thoughts are going to creep back in. For many, many, many years, we would go travel and we would play a game called credit card roulette. We were so broke, we had a stack of credit cards, and I wouldn't even go in with Becky to the hotel. I was so, not embarrassed, just I thought it was going to, So she'd swipe a card, swipe a card, swipe a card, till we'd find one that would work and we could take the kids on a vacation. So for 3 or 4 years after we got our feet under us, I wouldn't go to a hotel with her for that simple reason, because those thoughts would always creep back in. I was at the hardware store here a couple years ago, and a lady, she was telling me, she goes, I used to be a single mom, and I didn't know that. And she shared some stories with me about the lights, always keeping the lights on, but always being scared. And for just a minute, I was flashed back to 15 years ago in that old house, and I'd taken a day off from work, and I saw the power truck pull into the yard. And I thought, this is the day that I absolutely failed my kids. Now, it turned out that they were just coming to change a light bulb, but I thought that was the day that the lights finally got turned off. that stuff comes back, because it always comes back because it's there. It's always part of who you are. But it's okay. You just, you know, sometimes I title this Killing the Poverty Mindset. And I say you got to take them out and curb stomp them. And then they haul him off in the body bag, and then you get a call from the hospital, and they're like, hey, he's still on life support. So you got to go in, you got to pull the plug out, and then some nurse comes behind you and thinking she's doing a good thing, and she plugs it back in. And it jumps up on you after one, after another, after another. But it's okay. Just remember, you've made your mind up. You're ready to do great things. Simple as that. All right. You remember that little boy that we said over here just a few minutes ago? Again, remember, his dad was an alcoholic. He died. His mom wanted nothing to do with him. Sent him away with his grandmother. So, that little boy, one day, I turned on CNN, and that little boy was on CNN. And do you guys know Don Lemon, the interviewer? He was interviewing this little boy. Of course, he wasn't a little boy now. He was a nearly 80-year-old man at the time. And he said, if there was anybody out there that had a right to not do something great with your life, it was you. And that little boy was Morgan Freeman. You guys know Morgan Freeman? So Don Lemon looked at him and he said, you always say it doesn't matter where you grow up, what you do, how poor you are, you can do great things in your life. What do you do? What do you say to folks who say, but you don't understand. It's so hard here. You don't know where I came from. You don't know what it's like to grow up where it's absolutely poor. You don't know what it's like to live in a small town in Nova Scotia where nobody wants to do anything with their life. And only like an 80-year-old Morgan Freeman can do, he leans into the camera and he looks at him and he says, bullshit. He said, listen, if you want to do something great with your life, do it. He said, I don't want to hear your excuses. I could have made absolute excuses every single day of my life, and I didn't. He looks at him and he says, listen, you got to know, I grew up in a bad neighborhood. People ask me all the time, I don't know what to do. I can't get out of here. And he looks at him and he says, man, a bus leaves every day. So I don't know what your bus is. I don't know where you came from. I don't know what excuses your brain's telling you. I don't care. It doesn't matter. We did it. Doesn't mean it's easy. It might be simple, but it sure as shit ain't easy, I'll tell you that. So whatever your bus is, whether it's building a business, whether it's getting chickens, whether it's having rabbits, whether it's telling the man to take this job and shove it, I ain't working here no more, please don't do that right away. I don't want to get an angry call from your wife, but I'm just saying, whatever your bus is, you need to figure out what it takes to get on that bus, make it, and then do it. Simple as that. Thank you, folks. How are we doing for time up there? Okay, we'll do a couple questions then. If anybody's got any questions, we can go, or I can share a little more of my story, but anybody got any questions? It's gonna be quiet, we're gonna hear crickets here, so. For the record, I can share a little bit more about who, I really should have had a clock there, I would have went a little longer for you, but yeah, so, oh, yes, go ahead, sir.
Could you put this as an old school teacher principal?
Sure.
A lot of kids need to start hearing this mentality in middle school, not high school, not college. That's what's wrong now. They don't hear this mentality. They need to
I agree.
change some of the wording, and it would be fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, so for those who couldn't hear, he said that it needs to be tweaked a little bit, and middle school kids need to hear it. Absolutely. I do my best to know my audience. I figured I could get away with a couple of little cusses there, you know. But
They're used to that. Yeah.
absolutely they are. But you are correct, my friend. Like for us, I didn't talk about this, but there's a meme on the internet that is attributed to Will Smith all the time. There's no proof that he said it, but it says that the ultimate life hack is to move out of your hometown. No, what's that? Yeah, and now I'm not saying go move out of your hometown, but I'll tell you that was a life hack for me. So we got out of there because the problem is, most folks, when you live in the same town your entire life, you don't know any different. You know, my dad, we just flew him out to Alberta. It's the first time he'd been outside of Nova Scotia in his life. He was 68 when we flew him out there. You want to think he didn't know any different? I took him downtown Edmonton, which is about 1 million people. He got to see his first homeless person, which is sad, but he'd never seen that in his life. So sometimes moving, for us, what it was moving to Alberta. And there was a cool mindset out there of guys, it was a hustle culture that people just worked. I'm not saying there wasn't lazy folks out there, because they're everywhere. But it took me leaving my hometown, all that, you know, you don't understand. I can't get on the bus. What am I supposed to do? It took leaving my hometown to change my mindset. And you got to figure out what your idea of getting on the bus is to switch that up a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
Something else mindset.
So for those who couldn't hear, or them, you know, on the recording, it was that you got to set an example for your kids. And I want to add a little more to that, because you're going to be an example for your kids. You just got to decide whether you're going to be a good example or a bad example. Because here's the thing, that family I talked about in my hometown, I still keep in touch with the one boy. However, here's the thing, they looked at their family situation, and 2 of them took it as a bad example, and 2 of them took it as the example for life. Normal, right? That's exactly it. So yeah, I mean, even if you try to be a good example, it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but you got to be the example for your kids. Absolutely. Because I'm going to say, I'll bet your daughter has every right in the world to make excuses and say, I don't want to work. But she doesn't, does she? Because, man, I'm telling you, we get one kick at the can at this, and we have, that's it. You get to decide what you want to do. And you can sit around and you can make excuses all day long, because it's easy to make excuses. That's the easy thing, you know? Once you get up and get going, I had a good buddy of mine, Joel Riles. He runs Fortress Canine. If there was ever a dude who had the right to say, I give up, his whole world was tore out underneath him, and he came back and he rebuilt his business 3 times as big as it ever was. He is doing so good now. But here's the thing, I asked him one day, I said, dude, you are a machine. How do you find motivation? And he almost got a little offended with me. He said, I don't find motivation. He says, motivation finds me. I get up and I start going, and eventually I feel like doing it. But if I didn't, I'd never do a thing. And he told me the same thing, and this is the best description of my wife you'll ever find. He said, whenever you find a boulder in a path, he said, you got a couple of options. Number 1 is you turn around and say, well, that didn't work, now did it? Or the other one is, how do I get around, how do I get over, or how do I blast that thing to pieces and go straight through? And that's my wife, I'm telling you. I can put the work in, but she is the one that knows how to blast through obstacles when it comes to building businesses. And that's what you got to do. And I talk about business because that's what we know. But you can apply this to absolutely anything you want. It could be relationships, it could be family, or it could be homesteading, whatever you want. But simple as that. You just got to do it. Anyone else? Right down here, young feller.